keep you company, they'll keep you sane. On a long bike ride or a slow work day, Meg and Ben waxing about a playoff race. Whose bat's hard? It's effectively wild. So stick around, you'll be well beguiled. It's effectively wild, like Nolan Ryan was sometimes.
Hello and welcome to episode 2356 of Effectively Wild, a FanGraphs baseball podcast brought to you by our Patreon supporters. I'm Meg Rowley of FanGraphs, and I am joined by Ben
Almost made it. Made it about halfway through the name. Actually, more than halfway through the last name.
Ben Lindbergh.
That's it.
How are you, Ben?
How are you? Which I was going to ask before that minor introductory stumble there.
Yeah.
But you've been busy. You just shepherded, 20-something posts to publication in the past day or so?
Well, I would be wildly remiss if I claimed shepherding as if I were the only shepherd.
Yeah, doesn't preclude other shepherds being involved.
Oh, yeah. We must thank Matt Martell among the shepherds. He's really the other shepherd, at least on the FanGraphs side. Let's see. We published 19 things yesterday. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as we are recording right now. Matt's shepherding a 7th. Davey just filed an 8th. And we're also going to have a prospect ranking post that'll go live probably sometime tonight or tomorrow morning. So it's a lot of sheep, as it were.
Has transformed you into Count Van Count, it sounds like. We're here on a Friday afternoon. You're perhaps a little extra loopy, and yet we have a trade deadline debrief to do, a trade deadline digest, dissection, other words that start with D. It was a deadline. It was not a deadline, Meg. It was, I called you Med. See,
and what's your excuse? Did you even write on the deadline, Ben? No. You didn't even write on the deadline.
We'll get our names down eventually, another 2,300 something episodes. But
there you go.
It was busy. That is indisputable. It was eventful.
Yes.
I think there are two schools of thought on this trade deadline, two possible interpretations. So one is that this was active, this was wild, this was super exciting, this exceeded every expectation. And unquestionably, there were a lot of trades. And Jake and Jordan over at Cespedes Family Barbecue, their count was 36 trades. I don't know if they did that in the count voice, but 36 trades on deadline day. Yeah. And that was just on the final day itself, 52 over the final 2 days. They declared this a record, a new record for trades. And so that's one interpretation. Wow, this deadline just blew our expectations out of the water. We thought it was going to be sort of slow or inconsequential, and wow, were we wrong. The other interpretation was that a lot happened, but not that much of consequence, that there were many trades, but few impact trades, that this was sound and fury signifying something, but not that much in the grand scheme of things. I'd say Dan Szymborski initially struck this tone. He put on Blue Sky, I'm running the numbers now, but I suspect that when the ZIP simulations are done, this will project as one of the lower impact trade deadlines in recent memory in terms of the bottom line probability changes. Yeah. And I asked him whether that turned out to be the case when he did run the numbers, and he said, not completely. It was a little lower, but not interestingly so. So it wasn't notably inconsequential, but maybe the raw volume, the number of trades, is a little deceptive in terms of how much they move the needle. And that was Joe Sheehan's stance, too, in his excellent newsletter. He said that a lot of people describe the deadline as exciting. I don't see it. The median and mode trades were 3 guys who sounded made up in exchange for 25 innings of 3.5 FIP relief pitching from a third righty. The trades that don't fit that pattern were 3 guys who sounded made up for 5th starters and 4th outfielders, etc. So that was his take.
Okay.
But a lot happened.
Not to insult Joe, but has he heard of Mason Miller? Like, does he know who that is?
Well, yes, I think he is aware. But as he noted, Baseball America had 2 top 100 prospects traded. I don't know what the FanGraphs tally would be there, but that's more than the 0 from last year's deadline. But
We had non-zero last year, so
right.
There's that. But yeah.
Yes, yeah. So that, I guess, those are the 2 extremes. Those are the 2 poles, and often we come down somewhere in the middle, and that will probably be the case here too. I think there are elements of each of those interpretations that I agree with, and yet on the whole, I think it was certainly an interesting trade deadline. I think there's a lot that I'm excited to talk about.
Yeah, I think so. A couple of things about that, and I'm not meaning to snark at Joe, but I think you have a couple of things that can at least account for the way that this all played out in the projections. And Dan acknowledged this dynamic when he published his piece today on like sort of which teams saw their playoff fortunes move the most in zips as a result of the activity, starting with the Adam Frazier trade, that blockbuster, and concluding with yesterday's activity. And, some of it was that the highest profile trades that happened yesterday, not all of them, obviously, but many of them that happened yesterday or earlier this week involved relievers, and even very good relievers aren't necessarily going to move the needle from a playoff projection perspective all that much. We might be, if we are fans of the Mets or the Phillies or the Padres, thrilled to see those guys come October, and they definitely have the potential for outsized impact once we get to the part of the calendar where being able to deploy shutdown arms is particularly impactful, but you're not going to necessarily see that as much in the projections. So that's one thing. I think that part of it too can be accounted for as simply as when you look at what Baltimore did with their deadline, they got some good prospects, but they clearly were taking a volume approach rather than insisting on top return. Now, again, it doesn't mean that there weren't good prospects who moved at the deadline, both for Baltimore and for other teams. But I think maybe the best guy who moved, DeVries is probably the best prospect, though, it kind of depends what list you're looking at. But you also saw guys moving in the Duran trade. Like there were good prospects who went back and forth, but not the top guys, again, depending on your view of DeVries. So some of it was that there was more of a volume approach taken. And then you have trades like, and then we can dive into some of these in particular, I guess, maybe starting with this one, even if we want to. But you look at what, say, the Minnesota Twins did, arguably their biggest deal in terms of sort of resetting the trajectory of the franchise was moving Carlos Correa. And what they were interested in that transaction was salary relief, not a prospect, right? Now, I know that trade and Minnesota's approach more generally has been like very upsetting to Twins fans. Yeah. I'd get out of that Correa deal if it were me, and we can talk more about that. But like some of it too is that like the biggest names either involved relievers or were like, hey, won't you take $33 million of this back from us? The Astros, what a weird organization they are at this point. They're coming and going. They are they are Bagwelled and not. I don't know.
The same players coming and going often with these Astros. We got a listener email about that, just how many players they have reacquired.
Yes.
Just over the fast 5 years or so since the 2020 to 2021 offseason. Yeah. Jason Castro, Michael Brantley, Marwin Gonzalez, Justin Verlander, Rafael Montero, Michael Brantley twice, John Singleton, Kendall Graveman, Justin Verlander twice, Josh Hader, Miguel Diaz, Aledmus Diaz, Hector Neris, Ben Gamble, Cooper Hummel, John Singleton twice, Omar Narvaez, Taylor Scott, Hector Neris again twice maybe, Jordan Weems, Luis Guillorme, Carlos Correa. Yeah, that's a lot of guys.
Yeah.
to get back. And some of them, as this listener, Harry, noted, were Jesse Chavez type situations where someone's kind of sticking around and up and down. But that is a lot of guys who have reunited with that organization.
Yeah. Where should we start? Because there's a lot of trades here.
The balance that I would strike between those two extremes of it was wild and it was kind of a dud is that, yeah, I mean, most deadlines probably aren't super consequential. I think we tend to overrate the impact of the trade deadline in terms of just how determinative they are of who makes the playoffs or how far they advance in the playoffs. There's only so much time after the trade deadline. And as Joe always says, variance swamps everything. So you can project this or that. Some guys are, as I believe he wrote, are going to go off and some guys are going to go away. They're just going to do nothing and other guys are just going to be on fire for the rest of the season and it'll look like a brilliant trade, but it's not necessarily something that you could have expected or projected. But yeah, on the whole, other than a CC Sabathia trade here and there, it's usually not going to be the thing that decides a season, or at least it's hard to say in retrospect that it was the thing. But I think that there were a lot of interesting storylines from this deadline, at least. Like there's a lot of stuff that's just fun to chew on. There weren't that many individual moves that made me do a double take or say, oh, wow, I didn't think that kind of trade was going to get done, with the exception of Carlos Correa, which was partly because he was returning to the Astros, but also partly because I just didn't really foresee with the number of years and dollars that he has left on his deal that he would move. But I didn't foresee the depth of the Twins sell-off here, obviously. So that trade, and then the Preller A's Padres trade with Miller and Sears and DeVries, that's a big one too. So those are probably the two that really rocked me back on my heels. And that's not a lot, but then again, I guess how many major moves are you really expecting at a trade deadline? Other than that, it was a lot of guys who were expected to go who went, and oddly, some guys who were expected to go who did not, even though there was this great volume of trades. Like when this season started, if you had to peg two players who would have been traded at the deadline, it would have been Sandy Alcantara and Luis Robert Jr., and neither one of them went anywhere. So that is sort of surprising. But between the Twins doing their semi-mid-season fire sale and Preller up to his old antics and the Correa reunion, I think there was enough here that stood out to say, oh yeah, this was fun. This was eventful. This was, not individual trades that are like described as blockbusters. Like other than maybe the Miller trade I'd describe as a blockbuster. Other than that, I don't know.
Duran.
Yeah, maybe Duran. That's one thing that stood out. Is this was like a closer carousel.
Great year to have a closer you were interested in moving.
Yeah, or acquiring. I mean, there were, like 6 guys, I guess, who were closers or who were their team's designated save getters at some point this season.
Yes.
Duran, Helsley, Miller, Finnegan, Bednar, Doval, and there's a big gap between Duran and Finnegan. Let's say I realize that, even though they're both closers, but still, that's a lot. I think that seems like a lot. And Neil Payne did some analysis about how many relievers were moved at this deadline, and that's always kind of the case because there are just a lot of relievers and they're just not nailed down, really. They're so fungible and everyone could use one, really. And so even bad teams will typically have a good reliever they could part with. So, and there are just a lot of them that aren't on long-term deals. So they tend to be on expiring contracts and they're good rentals. And if you're headed for the postseason, then that you're going to really rely on relievers. You're going to need them. Yeah, once you get to October. And one thing that Neil pointed out this season in particular was that a lot of the good teams that are in shape to make the playoffs actually don't have good bullpens. Yeah. And so I think that created a need. If you had like the Cubs, the Blue Jays, the Tigers, the Yankees, the Phillies, the Rangers, the Mariners, these are a lot of teams that are probably ticketed for October, but didn't really have those shutdown late inning guys that you really want in October. And so that created this alignment between needs and whether their teams were getting rid of, other than like the Brewers, the Astros, the Padres had good bullpens. Not that stopped A.J. Preller and the Padres from further upgrading their bullpen. This was like, it was a throwback. It was nice to see Dipoto and Preller up to their old tricks, like they've been kind of quiet and by their standards, and it's nice to see them get that release, because that had to feel good for Jerry and AJ to be making moves, pulling triggers.
We have the concept of the challenge trade, right? Where it's like you trade your guy who need, and then it's like, I think that every year AJ introduces his own version of a challenge trade to the writers of America, where he's like, I'm going to do a trade that you weren't anticipating, and I dare you to not use the word stimulant in it, your analysis anywhere at all. I'm just saying, like, the man...
He's wired differently.
Wired differently. What a lovely way to put that. I liked seeing them active. I will say that I thought this was a very, this is going to sound like a backhanded compliment, and I don't mean it to, but in a way, I thought this was Jerry's most straightforward and almost restrained deadline, and also his most impactful. And I don't want to discount the Randy Arozarena trade from last year, because that obviously paid dividends for them, even though they didn't make the postseason. Like, it helped to dramatically reshape that offense for the second half last year. And clearly he's an important part of their lineup this year. But I feel like Jerry can have a red paperclip tendency, right? Where he's like, I'm going to eventually trade this into a World Series ring. And that's not what he sounds like, and he never does it, or he hasn't yet. And this year it was like, hey, our offense needs upgrading. Those two bats can really help. They're going to bolster our infield corners. We're going to reunite with Eugenio Suarez. The city of Seattle is going to go nuts. They were talking on the broadcast last night. It was Eric Goldsmith and Ryan Rowland-Smith in the booth, and they were both remarking upon the fact that, like, Mariners fans are so happy that Eugenio is back in Seattle, and they act like that guy was in the org for like 10 years. He had 2 seasons with the Mariners before now, but I think it's just a testament to like what a good clubhouse presence he is. Like, he seems to, wherever he goes, just like engender a lot of affection from the media, from his teammates, certainly from fans. But yeah, Jerry was like, our offense needs an upgrade. Ben Williamson, who has been playing third base for Seattle, is a terrific defender, and I'm sure that he will remain on the roster and be there as, at the very least, a late inning defensive replacement. But it's like, we need to do better than Ben Williamson's bat, and we need to do better than Rowdy Tellez or Luke Raley or Donovan Solano. And so they just went out and got Eugenio Suarez and Josh Naylor. Bing, bang, boom. I'm sure that they would have liked to bring in additional bullpen reinforcement outside of Caleb Ferguson, although I liked that move, even though it was smaller, because they had exactly one reliable lefty in the bullpen prior to his acquisition. So, it was quieter in a way, but I think it's just like they had needs, and those needs were mostly addressed, with the possible exception of them getting like a higher impact relief arm. So good job, Jerry. And then, AJ's just like, oh, you think I can't trade for Mason Miller? You think I can't freaking trade for Mason Miller? I'm going to go trade for Mason Miller. And then he did. Yeah. But they did other stuff too, right? Like, Mason Miller is like a very surprising luxury option for them, given the rest of their bullpen. What they really needed was a reliable DH, and he went and got one of those too. And that's good.
Yeah, on Jerry, I was sort of impressed that they went back to that Suarez because they did sort of soury dump him. And they seemed to feel like perhaps his best days were behind him. And he had played like that late in his Mariners tenure. And so there's a certain amount of having to swallow that maybe you misjudged the guy, or maybe that was the wrong move at the time, or maybe it's kind of conceding, like, to bring that guy back and to win a bidding war for him when he's the most desirable bat on the market, that does kind of take some owning up, I guess, to saying, oh, well, maybe it wasn't the best move to get rid of that guy when we did, but we're not going to double down on that by now depriving us of his services in 2025 too. He's what we need. Maybe we should have kept him all along. He's even on the same deal. Like he didn't sign in. He's not like more affordable now or anything.
Right. Yeah.
He's just having a really good year, and that deal's almost up. And so they went and got him. So I thought that was nice. Not like being too proud to admit that the guy you need now is the guy you let get away. I think that's good, right? So so between Suarez and Naylor, everyone has wanted Jerry to go get bats, and he went and got bats.
Got some bats.
Good job, Jerry.
Went and got some bats. He needed a bat. He was like, oh, I need a bat. And then it was like in Ocean's 11. He's like, you think we need one more? I think we'll go get one more. And they
got the best one, probably.
I agree that they got the best one. And, with a livable, you're generally not going to get good players without giving something up, right? Like the days of teams getting really well and truly fleeced in deals, I don't want to say it doesn't happen, but like most front offices are pretty savvy. And there might be guys where the evaluation that a front office has is fundamentally different than the rest of the industry, and that should perhaps give them pause. Like I'm sure that if Oakland had the Sean Murphy deal to do again, they'd do it differently now. But it's unusual for a team to just get skunked by another club. And so you're going to give up good players generally, or you're going to get salary relief or something. Like there's often a legible and sort of logical rationale for these transactions, even if the fans might not like it or it doesn't end up working out or whatever. Having said that, like I think the Diamondbacks got good players back from Seattle in both of these deals, but there was no like, mortgaging of the future here, right? Like maybe you really like Locklear's bat more than I do. But like it was fine. I thought they didn't have to give up any of their top guys to get either of those dudes, which is appropriate because, Eugenio's a rental. But he was the best bat available. And sometimes when you're the best bat available, you end up returning like much more significant prospects than your contract and your production would necessarily merit. But that didn't happen this time. It's like Arizona got good players. Some of those players are either close to the majors or, Locklear's probably just, my mom is coming to visit. She knows it's wild for her to come this time of year, but she loves me. And I'm taking her to Diamondbacks game while she's here, and the depravity we are going to see. the stripped down. We might get to see Mason Miller close a game for the Padres, though, so that's going to be cool and weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about AJ.
Yeah.
He owns the deadline. This is his time. It's just, I was asked by another Ringer editor, Isaac Levy-Rubinette, is AJ Preller good? Is he a good GM? And I said, not sure if he's good, but he's good for content. That much is definitely true. It is fun to talk and write about AJ Preller because he will just do things that no one else does. And we kind of complained sometimes about how all the GMs and the Pobos, they're just cut from the same cloth these days. And a lot of them talk the same way and they operate the same way and they have similar models and they're conservative and they value prospects and all these things. And okay, they probably know what they're doing. But it's nice to have just someone who's out there just on an island doing his own thing and standing out. And that could be an advantage. It could also be a disadvantage, depending. But you look at AJ Preller and you think, like, how does he keep getting away with this? How does he keep doing this? How does he always have prospects to trade? And that's the thing that impresses me, is that he has traded entire farm systems worth of prospects. I remember a Baseball America piece from like 2021 about how the Padres had traded like a whole 40-man roster worth of prospects over the preceding 2 years or something. And he just keeps doing that. And Isaac said to me, yeah, it feels like one of those magical coin sacks that improbably always has room for more. It's like the loaves and the fishes or something. It's just like just when you think that Preller has completely cleaned out the farm system and he can't keep enticing teams to make trades with him because he has got nothing left, no, suddenly he's scouted or signed or developed another excellent prospect. And DeVries is a good example of that. So DeVries, a consensus best prospect who is traded at this deadline, 18-year-old shortstop who's in high A. And there's some difference of opinion on him. Like FanGraphs has him 21st overall prospect in baseball. Pipeline has him 3rd overall. That's a pretty
We're
big
definitely
difference.
The low outlet on DeVries.
Yeah. But still pretty high. If that's the low, that's pretty high. He's an excellent prospect.
Yes. And like I don't want anyone to like come away. Don't anyone come away confused from this. Like he's a great prospect. He's but we have him as a 50, where I think a lot of publications have him closer to like where Walcott and Made, Connor Griffin, in the 60 range. So
yeah. So you look at a list of all the prospects Preller has traded over the years, and it does maybe make you a little sick to your stomach if you're a Padres fan. It's like Trey Turner, James Wood, Max Fried, Mackenzie Gore, Andres Munoz, a bunch of guys who were traded to other teams at this deadline were Padres prospects in the past, like Josh Naylor and David Bednar for that matter, and C.J. Abrams, and just Class A for that matter. Not that he was traded, we know why, but just so many guys who started their professional lives as Padres and then went out in this great Padres diaspora to other organizations. And so you could say, oh, well, they sure would like to have some of those guys back, and I'm sure that they would. But there's just as long a list, probably a longer list, of guys who were big prospects at the time and then just haven't panned out. And he traded them at, like your Luis Surias or Luis Patino or Graham Pauley or all these guys who were top prospects, and now no one really thinks about them that much. Right. So that's the problem with prospects. Most of them don't pan out. And maybe it's an advantage if everyone else is saying, no, you can't pry any prospects away from me. And AJ's just like, we'll make more, we'll part with these guys. We'll get more proven commodities, sure things in the short term, and then we'll figure it out. And he clearly has some acumen when it comes to international scouting. Like that's been a strength of his going back to his Rangers era. Yeah. And he has managed to just refresh the pipeline enough that he could always get a deal done when he wants to get one done. Now, this particular deal, I don't know. I don't know that I love it. Not like a super prospect expert, but I like DeVries. You got to like anyone who's that young and that advanced and plays shortstop and everything. Yeah. And Mason Miller, like obviously an excellent reliever, but the Padres don't really need him. I mean, he helps, of course, but that was a strength of theirs. And there was some talk that, okay, they're now going to trade Robert Suarez and they're going to trade Dylan Cease. And they didn't do that. And credit to them that it was just all upgrade for them. Right, yeah. But also, did they need Mason Miller that acutely or J.P. Sears? How big of an upgrade were those guys really? And Miller is under team control for a few more seasons, so it's not like a rental situation, obviously. But even so, just a lot of volatility with that kind of player profile, reliever, hard thrower, et cetera. I know there's been some speculation that maybe they'll turn him back into a starter or something. Yeah, that they might upcycle him. Yeah, so perhaps there's some upside there. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like a steep price to pay. It's definitely the type of price that teams tend not to pay at the deadline anymore, surrendering a prospect of that caliber. So he makes that trade that I think a lot of teams would have been hesitant to make. And then there was clearly some unfinished business because the Padres needed bats. And then they went and got bats too. So they went and got Ryan O'Hearn and Ramon Laureano from the Orioles. Now, Laureano's been excellent this season, which has completely come out of nowhere for me. Like, I didn't, and he has a high BABIP and all the rest. It's not like complete mirage, but definitely sort of unexpected performance for Laureano as opposed to O'Hearn, who's a pretty good hitter. So I don't know how much I trust that continuing.
Yeah.
But then there were other depth moves. He goes and gets Nestor Cortez from the Brewers. He gets Freddie Fermin, the catcher from the Royals.
Thank God.
Yeah.
They DFA'd Maldonado last night too.
Yeah. It gets Will Wagner from the Blue Jays.
Yeah.
It's just like all sorts of moves that Preller is making here. So for me, that seems like, the bats they got were not like superstars, but I think were needed. They needed guys like that.
Yeah. And if you look at obviously, I'm sure, I don't think San Diego has any complaints about their production out of right field, but the other corner has been a problem for them all season. I'm sure that they're relieved that they didn't try to bring Profar back, but they've had issues in left pretty much the entire year. And, Laureano's in some ways miscast in left because he's a better defender than you typically have over there. He could cover center if you really needed him to, although he's been in left for most of his recent career. But he's an upgrade. Sometimes it's about getting a position to the point of acceptability rather than having it be a black hole, right? Freddie Fermin is a fine player. He's on any other team, he's just straightforwardly a backup catcher. That was the role that he played in Kansas City. But the depth of San Diego's catching despair to this point, shocking, right? And so for him, this is kind of this is a good trade for San Diego. And this is one of those times where I'm like, good for Freddie Fermin, because now Freddie Fermin's going to be just a starter and he's going to get more time. And he's on a team that's postseason bound with much greater certainty than would be the case in Kansas City. You get to go live in San Diego.
Sure.
Get out of here. That sounds fantastic. So that, I think that I agree with the idea that DeVries is a steep price for what is basically a luxury reinforcement to an already very strong unit. I wouldn't even say an upgrade because you can make a case at least for this year's version of Mason Miller. Now there have been prior years where you're he's just the best reliever in baseball, but this year's Mason Miller has been diminished relative to his very strong rookie campaign, and yet is still good. Man, Mason Miller's I get to go live in San Diego. I don't have to live in Sacramento anymore. Mason Miller, that guy, what a great time. What a champion.
Yeah.
What a life lived right now. Didn't have anything to do with it. Still great. So, it's he's not even really an upgrade on their existing unit. He's a reinforcement of an already strong unit. But they have to deal with the Dodgers. And Mason Miller helps them deal with the Dodgers next year, to your point. He's under team control for such a long time. And he can be a tremendous reliever, or maybe they will try to upcycle him into being a starter and that'll work out, or maybe it won't. And if it doesn't, so what? He goes back to the bullpen. It's hard to judge AJ as an executive because I generally am of the belief that from a process perspective, San Diego's a mess. The Padres are a mess. It is sound and fury signifying a good team, but often it seems to the outside anyway that it is a couple of folks in that front office and they get a wild hair in them and all of a sudden you have Mason Miller in your bullpen. And so I think from a modern process perspective, disaster. But the results can be really fun and they can be really good. And I think that having a base aggressive instinct when you have to contend with the rest of that division is generally an asset. It doesn't mean that it always works out for them long term. And obviously, Preller has had some catastrophic misses in terms of his trades. But I do generally think that you at least want to look, up north and go, I gotta be a rock'em sock'em robot sometimes. I don't even know what metaphors I'm mixing right now. I am pretty surprisingly not loopy today. I do feel the crush of a month's worth of fatigue, but I feel like I'm holding, but still rock'em sock'em robot? Who am I? Anyway.
I saw a tweet or Blue Sky post of someone who said I used the phrase "Bob's your uncle" in an interview, and I've never said that before in my life. And people were just quote tweeting all sorts of like weird expressions that they used out loud, despite never having said them before. Yeah,
rock'em sock'em robot. Did you have rock'em sock'em? I just enjoy saying rock'em sock'em. I think is what I'm learning in this instant.
Well, you only have to hold it together until the end of this episode, and then you can rest, maybe.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
Yeah, you pull back, and okay, so yeah, Miller is like maybe gilding the late inning Lily a little bit there, but yeah, like it's exciting. He's from the day he started, he's been making exciting trades and signings and all the rest, and it's now, I guess it'll be 11 years that he's been running the Padres front office in a couple days, and he's made the playoffs 3 times. Now he's probably about to make it a 4th time. And also 2023 was just weird and kind of fluky that they didn't make it. So they have had a sustained run of being in contention here. And obviously that depended a lot on the fact that they splurged and spent a lot of money. It wasn't all just AJ engineering this through the brilliance of his trades. But yeah, it's not, he hasn't like taken them to the promised land exactly. And there's been a lot of going forward and then stepping back, and he's tried to kind of circumvent a rebuild and then figured out, oh, maybe we actually do have to do this kind of the slower way. And then, it is a tough assignment in the NL West, as you said. The thing is that they have developed a lot of talent, or at least a lot of talent has originated with them. It's not that they've developed it always, but either they haven't really given themselves a chance to develop it in a lot of cases because they just traded guys, or players have failed to launch in San Diego. So it does seem like they're stronger when it comes to the scouting and the signing than the doing the developing.
Yes, but at least on the pitching side. I think that they've had more success among their position players. But you don't have a lot of homegrown Padres pitching talent to look at and say like, oh yeah, they made that guy better than when he entered the org.
Right. Yeah. And Zach Kreiser ran the numbers on this in the bandwagon, and he found that, they have generated more major leaguers than almost anyone else. Like maybe the Dodgers, the Astros, the Cardinals, the Yankees are up there. But if you look at all the regulars in baseball today, then like players who originally signed as Padres have been more productive than players who have originated with any other organization except the Dodgers and the Astros, who were kind of the 2 leading player development franchises for some time there. So that's a feather in their cap, but very little of that production has come with the actual Padres, or is coming with it this year. If you look at their roster, Zach found only 16% of the 2025 production from original Padres has come for the actual Padres, the lowest percentage of any franchise. So just not a lot of homegrown guys. Like the median MLB team, he found, is reaping 47.5% of the benefits from the current big leaguers it signed. So almost half. And no other team in contention is below the Cubs, who are at like 30%. And then the Padres are at about half that. So they've minted all these major leaguers, they've signed them, they've found them, and then they've given them away for the most part. And that's like almost doing it on hard mode, I guess. Like the way that a lot of teams build successful franchises, they sign and develop, draft players, and then those players play for them and give them a young, cost-controlled core. And the Padres do most of that, but then not the part of like actually getting that cheap production from those players. They just move them on for someone else's major leaguers. So it is a lot of work to get to where they are. It's just a lot of dancing and plate spinning and all the rest. And it's highly entertaining from afar to watch it happen. And there's going to be some heartbreak with the guys they give up, but there's some method to the madness, I guess. It's made possible by the fact that they keep somehow reaching down and coming up with another wave of prospects that they can peddle for established big leaguers. And that's certainly a skill in itself.
And it'll be interesting to see how, if at all, their kind of roster building approach adapts going forward, because part of what has backstopped Preller's ability to do what he's done and take the sort of tact that he has over the last couple of years was that it seemed like maybe the money wasn't endless, but that they were going to operate within whatever financial constraints they needed to build the team, they being the front office, rather than like ownership saying, hey, sorry, you got to go sell. And obviously the appetite for that seems to have changed with with Seidler's passing, with some of the consternation within that ownership group. So I don't know how many deadlines like this they will have, because if suddenly your young cost control core matters a lot more, maybe you can't trade, a top 20 prospect for like a reliever. Maybe you can't do that. Mm-hmm. But so far, AJ gonna AJ. So
yeah,
I don't know. It seems like it's been fine.
Yeah. So that's the addition, the team that added that made the most waves. And a lot of the waves at this deadline were generated by the Minnesota Twins, sadly for Twins fans. But this was the thing that kind of catapulted the trade activity at this deadline above a lot of people's expectations, is that you had the Twins single-handedly making double-digit total of trades, or I don't know how many it came to, but they ended up shipping out about 40% of their active roster.
I think it was 11 players.
Yeah, that's certainly more than I expected. So I don't know what to make of this. Like, Derek Falvey puts out a statement basically saying, like, this had to be done, that we think we're in a stronger position now. I mean, what else is he going to say? But, just like this group wasn't quite good enough. And so we had to make the painful decision to basically start over and do a rebuild here. Obviously, hanging over all of this is the impending sale of the Twins, which sounds like it could be coming in a matter of weeks. So that something will be announced here. And it's very odd that this is the way it works, that this is evidently something that makes a franchise more attractive to potential bidders. Just like, let's strip the roster down to its studs. Like, what is the value of a baseball team? I mean, it's that they're only 30 in the majors, and there's a ballpark, and you have a following, and you have media rights, and all this stuff that's sort of hardwired, and it almost doesn't matter who's on the roster. But then, you can see it in the Twins' attendance figures, which have fallen fast because they haven't given their fans any reason to come to the park lately. They've just sat on their hands. I mean, maybe Twins fans would prefer their approach at the last couple deadlines, which was do nothing. That was like, this was a monkey's paw. If you didn't want that to happen again, was this what you wanted? Probably not that either. But over the offseason, too, they just didn't do anything. And so basically everyone who was rumored to go except for Joe Ryan left. And it's just odd that you would want to pick up. I guess I understand the appeal of starting fresh. Like, okay, we're picking up this asset, the Minnesota Twins, and there's not a lot of other spending and commitments that someone else made that we're now saddled with. But like, you want a good baseball team that people will come to see so that you can make money, right?
You would think that.
Yeah.
You would think that. I want to remind everyone, you never have to hand it to them. You just don't even Uncle Steve. Mm-hmm. But like the number of owners who just don't seem like right now we have a lot of owners in the baseball cap and quarter zip molds, right? Which is like when I think I've said this before on the pod, like when I saw Cone like in the front row in that outfit during the postseason last year, I was like, oh, the Mets are going to sign Juan Soto. Like, oh, okay. I understand this differently now than I did before. Mm-hmm. This guy wants to be the team, right? Like he is doing, and like, spoiler alert, Steve Cohen wants to make money, but like, he's in it in a different kind of way, right? And not the only owner who is like, I view my team as at least in part and more so than many of my fellows in this weird little group, a civic institution, right? Like there aren't enough owners who none of them go to the grocery store. So this is like kind of a broken way of describing this, but like there just aren't enough owners where they want someone in the frozen food aisle at the grocery store to be like, you're doing great with the team, you know? Like you need, maybe the answer is that they need to be out in the world more so that they can be congratulated or yelled at, whatever's appropriate, you know? But I just don't think there are enough owners that are sort of in that hypothetical group. I say hypothetical because again, none of them actually go to the grocery store, but you know, this is the problem that you run into, and I think it explains in large part this phenomena you're describing, because part of what reinforces that virtuous cycle of, hey, but at base, we want to have a good baseball team, is viewing the team as either a civic institution for your community to enjoy or an expression of your own narcissism. And if it occupies one of those two for you, you're probably going to invest more in your club. But if your understanding of it is, well, we have this tremendous opportunity to be in a constrained asset class, you've already lost the thread. And to your point, I'm sure that there is some amount of this that is explainable by, like, we might have a vision for how a roster ought to be built. We might have we want to bring in our own guys. We want this club to be our club. But it does strike me as strange that it's not a bigger problem for them to just be like, well, you're going to be a bad baseball team for the first however long. And I think Minnesota did well, given what I imagine was a directive from ownership for them to shed as much payroll as they possibly could at the deadline. You know, I think they came into the year like, hey, let's have one last ride. And if you guys are in contention come the deadline, like maybe the directive would have been different. But given where they were, I think they were just like, everything must go, you know. They did reasonably well given that mandate. Like, it does feel bad to have the guy who you committed a franchise record contract to sort of unceremoniously sent back from whence he came for nothing more, quote unquote, than contract relief. But I do think that's kind of a defensible move on their part, because I think the back end of that Correa deal might look really bad. And we might be in the beginning of really bad right now. But it's hard when you're sending guys who, excite the team, when you're sending the best closer, sure, you're excited about like Tait, but like, are you that excited? Are you that excited about Mick Abel? Do you, don't you want Louis Varland like in the fold for longer? And again, I think that like these are defensible moves insofar as they were told, hey, you got to shed payroll. And so I think they brought in prospects, some of whom will end up being good players for them, but it's a really tough pill to swallow, and I want Twins fans to know that like I hear, and I know that we have a number of listeners who are Twins fans, and so I'm not trying to discount like the experience of this from a fan perspective, because it really sucks. And I think that it really sucks especially because fans know you can take this approach, right? You can do the hard rebuild, and like sometimes it works out, but sometimes you're the Baltimore Orioles and like you're still selling off everything in sight that you possibly could. They're only I didn't realize this. I didn't quite clock it until Curie was writing her piece on the Mullins deal. But the only healthy pending free agent who wasn't shipped out of Baltimore over this deadline period is Sagano. All the rest of them are gone. And now they have hurt guys, right? Like Eflin's still there and Gary Sanchez, but like they don't have anyone who's not on the IL and a pending free agent who is still on that roster. And so it's like, I think that we can sometimes get a little caught up in the surplus value of it all, and a brighter day will dawn. And I hope so much that is true, but I understand it feeling bad in the immediate term. And I understand not taking for granted that like it will materialize into a better team, because sometimes it doesn't. And then you're just like, left with a collection of arbitration or pre-arb indistinguishable blondes. Some of whom are very good, but some of whom have been less fortunate. I'm talking about all the guys in Baltimore who look kind of the same.
I think there's something to be said for being decisive when you do decide to do a rebuild, then really do it. And I'm saying you have to absolutely, totally tank and be terrible, but just pick a lane. I think that can be helpful sometimes. And that was sort of how Falvey tried to sell it.
Right.
We made a clear and deliberate decision to strengthen the next chapter of championship caliber baseball. We didn't make surface moves. We acted with purpose. And it wasn't about patchwork or small adjustments. Okay, right. I think there's something to be said for that in some circumstances. Like I'd rather do that every now and then, rip the Band-Aid off than the Angels, let's say, who are kind of like nominally on the fringes of contention, and they just go pick up Andrew Chafin and Luis Garcia. Like that's going to make a difference. It's not like they gave up that much either, but they just
I can't wait. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in my Angels thoughts because I have a couple. But please continue. What a deadline.
They never say we're done. We need to start over.
Right.
And at some point, you just have to do that, or else you just end up treading water, or worse, usually sinking in their case. But you have a few guys who could kind of be the beginnings of a core of a competitive team, but then you're going for it when you have no realistic chance to go for it. Like I respect that's something that you want a Pobo or a GM to be able to do. And Buster Posey kind of did it, The Giants were kind of on the periphery of contention too, and obviously started the season well. And he was just like, looking at where we are and how we've been playing, it's not happening, So just reload for when you have a more realistic shot. And that's always tough. And it's especially tough in this expanded playoffs world where a lot of teams are close enough to have a chance, at least on paper, on the standings. But sometimes you have to know that's the difficult decision that you employ these people to make. Right. In the Twins case, though, I think it really smarts because they were there. Like they were right there. They had the championship caliber core. Right. And they just did not supplement it. And that's probably more of a Pohlad problem. But nonetheless, like Twins fans saw this team that made the playoffs in 2023 and had this continuity and these good players and just did absolutely nothing to improve on it. And like they did the hard part of acquiring a core. And then they just would not spend a cent really to improve it. And then they decide, well, this isn't working out. We have to start over. Well, yeah, because you kind of gave up on it prematurely. Right. So I think that's the source of the frustration. And maybe the Twins will be good again under new ownership in a few years. And it'll, be some of the guys that they got at this deadline who are driving that roster at that point. But it leaves a really bitter taste in your mouth where you kind of got close enough that you could see it and then just stalled out at that point because you stopped investing in the roster. And then suddenly you're trading Correa, Duran, Jax, Varland, France, Bader, Castro, Stewart, Paddock, Coulomb, just so many guys gone at once. I saw Chris Antonetti, the Guardians were playing the Twins, and he was like, we're going to have to do some work to like familiarize ourselves with who's on this roster that we're playing next. If I were the Cleveland
Guardians, I would not be making jokes about other people's deadline activity. That's just a little Meg quote you can throw out there. Sir. At least they didn't do what the Twins did for better or worse. They traded Bieber, but they didn't do a whole lot else. I agree. I want to know how they understand themselves. I'm really glad they didn't move Stephen Kwan. I'm glad that they mostly kept this group together. I think that and I think they did well with that Bieber trade. But also, you're just not a very active deadline team is my point. They never go, they're not like, we got to go for it. So it's just you leave the criticism of people's deadline strategies to, and I wasn't really criticizing them, but relax, my guy. Same is true for anyone who goes to play Baltimore. It's the only guys who are left are indistinguishable blondes. How will we ever figure out this?
It wasn't though, like, okay, so the Orioles and the Diamondbacks were in sort of the same boat. They expected to be good. I mean, the Diamondbacks were in a boat where they actually tried to get better over the offseason and made some significant moves, but didn't pan out for either of them.
Boats in the desert rarely do, you know?
Yeah, true. And so these beached boats, they decided, okay, we're going to just do some subtracting in the short term. They know that they have good enough players that they should, in theory, come back next year and be in line to contend. But they did what one typically does when you're kind of out of it. Fine, okay, I don't have a problem with that approach. But the Braves did not. They didn't do that. Those are the three teams that I would kind of group in like we're supposed to be good and just a lot of things went wrong.
Yeah.
And the Braves basically didn't do anything at this deadline. They traded Rafael Montero, I guess, but that's about it. Not that they had so much to trade.
Right. This is the thing.
Yes. Because all their pitchers are hurt. And then, Marcell Ozuna's not playing well. And I guess there wasn't that much for them to do. But I wonder, because Alex Anthopoulos said some time ago, we're not going to sell. And that like he couldn't even conceive of selling because it's been so long since he was running a team that was not in the playoffs or was not contending. And so,
all right.
I wonder if part of it was that and like the memory of 2021 and you never know. But yeah, when I look at their roster, I guess there's only so much that they realistically had to offer.
Yeah, I think that they found themselves in a modified version of the Diamondbacks situation where it's like the Diamondbacks had a clear, by the time the deadline rolled around, they had a clear case to sell, right? It could have gone either way for a while there, but I think that once, when they got to the point where they traded Naylor, it was like, okay, you're a game under 500. I get the direction here. I guess Naylor came a little after that. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. So like they were in this position where they had a clear directive to sell. They had made that choice. They have a bunch of guys on the team who are obviously going to be around for a long time and good next year. But they also had this crop of pending free agents. And so the decision they had to make was like, are we going to get enough in trade that it is worth it for us to send these guys away as opposed to keep some of them in-house, qualifying offer them, and then get draft pick compensation when the time comes, right? Which was part of Bauman's argument when I told him and Jay, I was like, you have to argue with each other about like whether they should sell or not. And I thought it was a point well taken, right? Which is that their option wasn't to either trade them and get something or keep them and get nothing, right? They could have extended the qualifying offer to a couple of them, Merrill Kelly, Eugenio, to Gallen, maybe. And if those guys had signed elsewhere, they would have gotten draft pick compensation for them. But the Braves didn't really have, like, they didn't have an Eugenio Suarez. If they'd had an Eugenio Suarez, maybe they wouldn't have had to sell at all. But, like, they didn't have that same sort of contingent of obviously good and valuable, but disposable in terms of the long-term roster fit guys, right? There was no Merrill Kelly on their team. So we should talk about the Rangers because their deadline was really weird to me. But so I'm kind of sympathetic to the situation that they found themselves in. That team is getting older though, like they are getting older and a lot of their younger guys are like injured pitching. So that's going to be an interesting thing for them to navigate because that group of like bright-eyed, Braves Foundation donors is getting closer and closer to 30 every day. Every day they are.
Yeah, there wasn't, for all the relievers who were traded and all the late inning guys, and that's one thing I guess you could say about this deadline is that there's a pretty good chance that we'll be watching late October games, even World Series games, and some of the last innings will be pitched by players who change teams at this deadline. So that's kind of consequential. The other thing I guess I would say is last time we talked and we were sort of setting up the deadline, we were thinking, well, maybe there will be fewer moves because so many teams are in contention and they could convince themselves that they'll be in the running either this year or next year or the year after.
Right.
The other thing, though, you could say, I guess, is because there are so many teams clumped together that there actually is a decent chance that the deadline this year could be kind of consequential just because marginal differences may make the difference this year. Like the wild card races, who wins that third wild card and who's on the outside looking in, that probably will come down to a game or two, right?
Yeah.
So that this very well could swing who ends up inside and who ends up on the cold in the outside. And, you look at Suarez and say, okay, he's probably the best player traded, best bat. Someone else who was traded will outwar him, I would expect. I would take the field over the best player because, he's good. He's not that good. And also
he's defensively limited. And
there are a lot of other players who could just get hot for a couple months. But it could end up really mattering, even if it's just a one WAR difference or something. Well, it might be a one game difference in the standings. But for all the relievers who were traded, there were very few starting pitchers.
Very few.
Yeah, and there are teams that needed a starter and didn't get a starter, and their fans are upset that they didn't get a starter, but at least no one else got one either. So it's not like
cold
you
comfort.
got outbid. Yeah, I guess I think the best starting pitcher who was acquired was maybe Shane Bieber, who hasn't pitched in the majors this season, but has looked good in his rehab appearances and should be back soon. And at least he has ace upside if he comes back and isn't too rusty or diminished by the Tommy John surgery. But other than that, what other starters were out there? Dustin May and Steven Matz, the guys that the Red Sox
and
got.
Matz has been in long relief pretty much the whole year. So
yeah, right.
I don't know that their plan is to make him a starter again. He's pretty. His splits are pretty dramatic. I think that he will probably, which also makes it a weird roster fit because I'm like, you have a bunch of lefties already, and then you're adding in the
Sears, back end guy. It's fine. Yeah, it's just a lot of
the Padres guys who moved to the Royals will probably have been starting and probably will, especially given Kansas City's. I thought that they threaded the needle in a nice way. Kansas City. I was generally pretty impressed by their deadline. It was muted, and I don't know if it'll work. And maybe for it to have worked, they needed to do something bolder. But I also think that it would have been really goofy for them to overcommit given where they are. And so I don't know. I thought that it's to your point earlier, picking a lane and having a decisive course of action is often the right move. And we have criticized teams over the years. The Red Sox come sort of most immediately to mind for this coming and going business. It's how do you understand yourself? I feel like the Royals, they didn't go, they came. Did they go? Went? I don't know. I like the Royals deadline. I thought it was fine. It's they upgraded in a couple of places, not dramatically, but in some spots it was their corner outfields were to the Royals what the Padres catching situation was to the Padres. And it's is a Yastrzemski Grichuk platoon gonna catapult you to the division lead? Probably not. Yeah. But it'll make you a more respectable baseball team. Maybe catch lightning in a bottle, a little lightning in a bottle.
Zach Littell, another starter who was traded, went to the Reds. Yeah. There were a few teams as there often are.
Home runs.
Jeez. I know. There are a lot of teams who do try to kind of balance the coming and the going, and there are times when that can make sense. I mean, you could upgrade yourself and maybe still get a good deal with an eye toward the future. But the Dodgers, I guess, were in that camp. The Rays, the Royals, to some extent, all made moves that you would classify as buying and selling, probably.
Yeah. The Dodgers deadline fascinated me because, speaking of another team that probably could have used a starter and didn't get one. In fact, they dealt one.
Yeah.
Their deadline was much more sort of future focused in terms of the best players they came away from their trades with were prospects. Yeah. I mean, they managed to insinuate themselves into that Littell trade and got a good prospect in the balance. But it was for a club that has both obvious flaws in the moment and a clear postseason ambition. They were more future focused than I thought they would be. They had Alex Call and Brock Stewart. So many Brocks. It's hard for me to say that name without going Brock. I want to put like some oomph behind Brock.
Yeah.
When did Brock become a name? What's that name about? I'm not trying to insult all the Brocks who listen to us. I'm sure there are a number of Brocks.
Yes,
it's just, what's up with your name? Who was the first Brock? You know? Who was the first? Brock.
The origin story of Brock.
See, and it's like I've said it enough where I'm like, what is that word? How are you allowed to put a B and an R and a C and a K so close together?
Oh boy. Oh, it's all catching up with you now. Okay. Well, where do we go from Brock?
Should we talk about the Rangers weird deadline just as a reset? What was up with the Rangers deadline? Here's the part of this that confused me. On the one hand, I can totally understand feeling nervous about your existing rotation situation, not because I guess Merrill Kelly was the best starter who moved at the deadline.
Yeah.
All right, let me here now I'll round into form on the Rangers. So I think Merrill Kelly is great. He is precisely the kind of starter that the Rangers need because he is good. He is above average. He is having a year even better than his like career numbers this year. There have been times in the last couple of years where he's had like cramping. I think because the air conditioning in Chase is bad. I don't know. But like he this year has been remarkably available, just like a super reliable steadying force for a rotation that has been like very injured or underperforming. Great. And I get them wanting to reinforce both the rotation and sort of the back part of that bullpen because, you know, like they have DeGrom, who's having a great year, but is made of candy glass, and Evaldi, who has been good. And then it's like a lot less sorted after that, right? Like rockers up and down and lighters up and down, not literally from the majors to the minors, but in terms of their performance. Gray is like in the bullpen now. They've had a bunch of injuries.
Put some respect on Patrick Corbin's name.
I was just going to say, and then they have Patrick Corbin having the season he's having and being very good for him relative to his most immediate seasons and super available. But you're not going to give playoff innings to Patrick Corbin unless something catastrophic has happened, right? So I get them wanting a starter, but also like their pitching has been very strong and their lineup has been at times underwhelming. It's been better over the last month, but like, you know, like they're running Adolis out there every day. They're going well. So, I mean, not every day, but you know, it's like they had obvious places that they could upgrade and they have a deep farm system. So in theory, like they had the prospect capital to make a move. And so I thought the way that they allocated resources to be so pitching heavy was just weird. And, you know, maybe they'll make a fool of me, but it just seemed like there were other bats that moved who were good. And I'm surprised that maybe they were in on all those guys and they just weren't able to get a deal done. But I'm a little skeptical of that. So I don't know. It's just like the shape of it was strange given their roster needs to me. So
yeah, I agree. Though since you brought up the Rangers, I must note that the biggest addition they made from my perspective was not adding Coulomb or Kelly or who else
Phil
did they
Maton.
get? Phil Maton, but Luis Corvello, whom they promoted this week and who made his major league debut on deadline day.
Yeah.
2 beautiful scoreless innings to complete my minor league free agent draft board. 10 for 10. It's official.
Can't believe this.
I'm hijacking the deadline pod for this.
You're using the deadline pod to brag about your minor league free agent draft
I have
team?
to tell the world I'm bursting with pride because Corvello, he had been on the taxi squad earlier this year and didn't make it into a game. And I felt like Armando Galarraga, I came so close to perfection. But unlike Galarraga, I got a do-over. And this is my proudest achievement as a prognosticator, perhaps my only achievement as a prognosticator, because I try not to prognosticate. They said it couldn't be done. 10 for 10, perfect minor league free agent draft. we'll return to that topic at the end of the season. But just had to crow about it a little bit. I'm sorry.
Okay, well.
I just hope that their new relief additions don't endanger Curvello's standing in that bullpen, because I still need those batters faced. But I'm very proud papa. Okay,
I'm happy for you.
Yeah, I know. I can sense that. The happiness is just the warmth in your voice.
Overwhelming.
So I guess other teams we should just quickly touch on. The Mets. The Mets were fairly active. They picked up a lot of bullpen help to put behind Edwin Diaz. They got Gregory Soto. And man, they got Cedric Mullins, who I know is not hitting like he did in his prime, but he robbed a homer in his last game as an Oriole, I think, the day before he was traded. So he still got it out there in the outfield, and that'll improve them. And then they got Helsley, and they got Tyler Rogers, who wasn't included in our previous listing of save getters and closers, but is one of the best relievers in baseball. We probably don't talk enough about Tyler Rogers and how consistent and unorthodox he is. Both of the Rogerses were traded, actually, on deadline day. But the Mets got the better Rogers. They got Tyler, and they gave up a fair amount.
Taylor got traded twice this deadline season.
Yeah, he did. It's true. He was a Pirate very briefly, I guess.
Very briefly.
Mets gave up kind of a lot in the Tyler Rogers trade, but Rogers is a really good reliever. So, these are teams that are pretty certain of their playoff bound status, and they're just trying to get those late October innings set, and they did that, and their rivals in the NL East also did that. They had sort of similar deadlines in a way, because they both got late inning help. They got closers.
Yes.
The Phillies added Duran, and they also added Bader. So that was their good defensive center fielder they picked up. Bader was sort of supposed to be Buxton's caddy, the latest of them. But until recently, Buxton had been healthy, so he didn't really need to back up Buxton so much, but he was actually hitting pretty well in Minnesota. So yeah, the Phillies and the Mets were both quite aggressive, but sort of canceled each other's moves out a little bit, I guess, at least when it comes to the division race. But, it's classic Dombrowski to part with some prospects to get relief help. And the Phillies have had better bullpens than Dombrowski's teams used to have, but they still needed some help in that department this year, and they got the best guy available. They got Duran, who is another guy who's under team control for a few years. So they had to give up Eduardo Tait and Mick Abel, catcher and big league ready starter, so two of the best prospects at the deadline. But these are teams that should be making that kind of move, the Phillies and the Mets for that matter. Like, Phillies are getting older and have this aging core, and they're in it, and this is the time when you make that type of move to rob the future to pay the present. They also picked up Matt Manning. So yeah, a lot of action there to make up for the inaction in the rest of the NL East of the other teams, which didn't do much. The Marlins didn't do much either. They didn't trade Alcantara. They didn't trade Cabrera. They just, I guess, like what they have. They've been surprisingly good lately. Anyway, yeah, like when you're in that position where you're pretty confident that you're going to be playing playoff baseball, then you just want to shore things up and solidify those late innings, because you know that those are going to be pretty important.
Yeah, I think that they each knew that they were going to go into the deadline being aggressive and trying to bolster obvious holes. And you bolster a hole, bolster a weakness.
Yeah.
They did that. And, it's remarkable when you look at the Zips projections for the Mets and the Phillies post-deadline. Like, they didn't really change their playoff odds that much, in part because they both made similarly matched moves, right? They're still sort of deadlocked, but they each improved their World Series odds.
Yeah.
Because they're better teams now than they were. So I just think it's a fun little bit of symmetry is all.
I guess two teams that were fairly inactive despite being in decent playoff position, though different playoff positions, the Cubs and the Red Sox. So the Cubs didn't do a whole lot. They picked up Michael Soroka and Andrew Kittredge and Willie Castro. And, those are all nice little moves. They picked up the other Rogers, Taylor Rogers. So they made several additions, but none huge on its own. And then the Red Sox, of course, who were rumored to be in the running for Joe Ryan late, were making a push, but evidently didn't get all that close to prying him away from Minnesota, so they settle for Matz and May. So their fans not pleased. They gave up the younger prospect, the outfielder, James Tibbs III, whom they got back in the Devers trade.
Yeah.
They then flipped him and another prospect to the Dodgers for May. So May, he's been one of the only durable Dodgers starters this year, but has not been that great. And I guess the Dodgers are feeling pretty good about their guys getting healthy in time for October, that they felt comfortable removing May from the mix, even though he's sort of been the staple, the stalwart in that rotation this season. And the Red Sox get him. And I guess there weren't that many impact starters available, and May has been better before. I like him as a pitcher and thought he'd be better than he's been this year. And they did address their deficiencies and their needs there, but not in a very exciting way. And then there was a Craig Breslow press conference where he just, kind of talked like he does in this sort of new age exec robotic way that I guess confirmed the Brez is a stiff perception that people seem to have now. And he basically did a "we tried."
Yeah.
He said if fans were in the office during this deadline, they would see that guys we didn't expect to be willing to talk about going into these conversations, we made available. We tried to put the most aggressive offers we could in hopes they were going to end in deals. I understand the frustration and the disappointment because we're all looking at the last week right now in terms of the trades that were made and weren't made. There's not a lot of sympathy for how hard we tried to get deals across the line. I understand that. That second to last sentence there has really been making the rounds, I think, kind of out of context because, he wasn't complaining about the fact that there wasn't a lot of sympathy. I don't think he was saying, woe is me, we tried really hard. Why won't anyone feel sympathy for us? But when you see that line, that sentence in isolation, it sort of sounds like that's what he's saying. But no, I think he was attempting to be empathetic and saying, I understand why there's not a lot of sympathy. But nonetheless, whatever he said, it wasn't going to go over well because, they made the Devers trade. They cleared all that salary. They've got all these young guys. They've got this great young core, and they had prospects they could dangle, and they just ultimately just didn't make very exciting moves. And they are in a spot where they kind of need to. I guess, which do you think needed to make moves more, the Cubs or the Red Sox? Because they had sort of similar playoff percentages, I think. Or no, the Cubs have a very high playoff percentage. Yeah. They're basically a lock, but they are kind of 50-50 in the division. And that obviously makes a big difference. Do you get that bye or not? Whereas the Red Sox have very little shot at the division, at least according to the playoff odds. And yet they have a pretty good shot at a wild card. And so you could say, well, they should be even more motivated to make moves because their place, their playoff berth is much less assured. But then again, the Cubs are in the running for a division, which is a bigger prize that may be out of reach for the Red Sox. So I guess, either way and the Red Sox are only, 5 games back in the East. So I guess that's not entirely out of reach. So there's a lot of frustration with the Red Sox organization right now.
So not that DePoto hasn't managed to put his foot in his mouth at different points, but I think that there was a realization on the Mariners' part at some point that a lot of what Jerry says inspires reaction, and I think a lot of that reaction is fair, but some of it is also a fatigue with him, and so it would be hard for him to say anything and not have it come across in a way that bothers people, and so that I think is part of why the organization has put Justin Hollander out front so much. Part of that is that he's the GM and he should talk to the media and they want to keep him. And so he needs to have a front facing role in addition to DePoto. But I think that maybe Breslow maybe it would be good for Breslow to have like a designated deputy for some of this stuff. Cause like it's not a great quote, but it also felt like people were ready to be mad at him, like you said, for whatever he said. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, but like, this is pretty early in your tenure for you to be at that point, you know? So I don't know. I don't know about that. It seems not good.
I guess they don't have a GM, right? So I don't think they do. I
don't think they do.
Yeah. So they don't really have a designated number 2 who could kind of fill that role maybe, but yeah, might be something to look into, I guess. Anyway, anything else we should touch on? I guess the Yankees were pretty busy, and I kind of like what they did.
I do too.
Yeah, there wasn't any one move maybe that's going to like persuade the Cashman haters out there, but you take it in some, they made quite a bunch of moves to address weaknesses. Like their bullpen went from not very good to pretty elite now, at least if you like look at the projections, adding Bednar and Doval and Jake Bird from the Rockies. Like that's a pretty big upgrade to your bullpen to make at the deadline. Bednar, we talked about Jake Berger's minor league reset earlier this year and the concept of the minor league reset, just sort of send a guy down, get his head straight, light a fire under him, whatever it is. Bednar also had that this year. He had a minor league reset, and he's come back firing after that. I guess Francisco Alvarez, too. The minor league reset. It's a fun phenomenon. But yeah, the Yankees, like we talked about the McMahon trade when that happened, and Rosario, they did a lot. They turned over a surprisingly high percentage of their roster, too, for a team that is adding. And Caballero they picked up from the Rays as well. So really remade their bullpen, gave themselves a lot of depth and versatility on the position player side. So, yeah, no huge star pickup that's going to win over Yankees fans who are unimpressed by this organization. But on the whole, lots of little improvements, I think.
They're in some ways a difficult roster to upgrade. They have all of this star power and money already sunk in. And a lot of the players are good, So I don't know that I think marginal changes were the order of the day, given that they're going to get Judge back and, they will have more pitching available in future seasons, obviously not right now. So it's just, they're in sort of a weird spot. So I thought that they did well given some of their concerns. Like I feel much better about that bullpen than I did before the deadline. Caballero is such an interesting, I mean this, I want to be clear. I mean this as a compliment. Jose Caballero is a pain in the ass. He's a pain in the ass if you're playing him. I don't know him as a person. I have no sense of him as a man, but he delights in trying to mess with pitchers around the pitch timer. And, he's a really hard base runner. And he is one of these guys who likes to kind of be a little annoying to his opposition, not in a way that's disrespectful or anything like that. I'm not trying to knock the guy, but in a way that feels purposeful, right? He's trying to be a little bit of a pain in the ass. And that's just a interesting fit for New York because, but they like playing the villain. They play the stupid, they do the, they have the evil empire reputation. So anyway, Jose Caballero is just an interesting fit for them. But yeah, I liked their deadline. Can I just say how weird the Angels are for a second?
Oh yeah. Well,
the Angels are so weird.
The Yankees guys that they got, those relievers, also under team control for a while. I think Bednar they have for next year, Doval for a few years. So they gave up some pretty decent prospects to get Bednar, for instance. But those guys aren't really rentals. McMahon wasn't either. So they've kind of done some of their offseason business here at the deadline as well. Okay, yes, please proceed in talking about how odd the Angels are.
They're so weird, Ben. It's fine for staff members to disagree. Jay Jaffe was very exercised about their deadline activity when he wrote about it, which I found fascinating because it's just so hard to get exercised about Andrew Chafin, and Andrew Chafin's a fine player. I thought that it was, you can't be mad because they didn't really give up a whole lot, right? It wasn't like they had a dramatic overpay. for him and Luis Garcia, I did have a moment where I was worried that I hadn't read the piece. I didn't edit that one. Matt did. Matt's a consummate professional, so Matt would never have made this mistake. But it's the deadline, everybody's busy, and I was like, wait, we had the right Luis Garcia in there, right? Yeah, right. Because there are a lot of Luis Garcias,
yes.
It's Joe Smith. That's a very common name. So anyway, but they didn't overpay. But they're also not two middle relievers away. So I'm just like, what is your understanding of yourself? Because it's weird. They're so weird, and I don't know.
Seems like they have a ownership mandate not to sell, but they also seemingly have an ownership mandate not to spend that much anymore. And a lot of their free agent additions really went wrong. And so I get why they might be a bit squeamish or gun shy, I guess. But yeah,
but it's like
you're
trying to. I guess if you can't sell, then you can't sell. But I don't know. You want to tell me that Kikuchi wouldn't have been a valuable trade target?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm so confused by that.
Anderson or I don't know. They had some guys.
Kind of. This is the other thing. It's like who, other than Kikuchi, who did they really have to trade? They're not going to move. I guess they could, they would have gotten, who they would have gotten a lot back for would have probably been Taylor Ward. They probably could have.
Yeah, given just how many moves were made, there were some, even on the Braves, someone like Raisel Iglesias, you got all these relievers and closers moving, not him or Pierce Johnson. And then the Marlins kept those starters, and the White Sox kept Robert and Benintendi and Tauchman, and the Pirates kept Tommy Pham and IKF, which I was kind of hoping he'd get traded so that my man Cam Devaney could get more playing time. But yeah, there were bunch of bad teams that still had at least a few maybe appealing players, and they just kept them. The White Sox did trade Austin Slater. I forgot in my recounting of Yankees moves, yet another addition that they made. And kind of nice, platoon outfield bat. He'll be somewhat useful for them.
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it's like whatever the opposite of death by 1,000 paper cuts is. It's just like you're adding with a bunch of little moves that amount to maybe a lot in the end. I guess we've come almost to the end here, and in classic Effectively Wild fashion, we have neglected to talk about the Reds, who did make some moves also kind of confusingly. So they got Miguel Andujar, who's still around. What a weird career he has had. And then they got Zach Littell, who, doesn't seem like the best fit for that ballpark, perhaps. They got Ke'Bryan Hayes from the Pirates, who, I have believed in him in various points. I thought that he was going to hit, and at times it really looked like he was. But boy, he sure hasn't lately. And physically, I'm just not sure that he can. But, the glove is great. But now what are they going to do with Noel V. Marte? I guess I get that they needed some help, but they're just always positionally kind of confusing. They're just always moving guys around. And sometimes we praise versatility and playing guys out of position. It's like positionless baseball. Hey, don't let guys get stereotyped or typecast or locked into a box. Maybe they could play other positions. But with the Reds, it often seems that they're just bouncing guys around, and maybe it hurts their development offensively because they're trying to play positions that they're miscast at. Anyway, I don't know. They seem like they could make a run. They have this core. Some of their core has underperformed. I guess Littell gives them some rotation depth and insurance if someone gets hurt, as is often the case in their rotation, which has been good on the whole, but is fairly fragile. But I don't know exactly how Andujar and Hayes fit with their existing alignment, and whether Hayes can hit at all.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. They're kind of confusing to me too.
Dan noted that they took on money with Hayes, and not a lot in the grand scheme. a surprising amount for the Reds, and their playoff odds actually went down.
Yeah.
I don't know if Brian Hayes will ever be able to hit acceptably. I understand wanting to try more. Now, my optimism around that has dimmed just because he's been healthy this year and he still hasn't hit. And so, like, in prior years, you'd be like, oh, well, there's been some injuries, been dinged. Not really the case this year. So that part of it is concerning. He is a really special defender. And so I get that part, but I find their strategy with infielders just generally over the last couple of years to be kind of confounding. And I don't know that their evaluations have been particularly good. Like, remember when they signed Candelario and then, and some of this isn't their fault, right? Like, Marte got suspended for PEDs. And so some of it is like and they've had a lot of injury on the infield. So some of it's that. But I also, given all of that sort of volatility, can understand them wanting to be like, well, let's just get this guy, have him anchor third. He's a good defender there, a really great defender there. And I think because his bat has struggled so mightily, we've kind of lost sight of how special he is at third. And then we just, we'll get him to hit or we won't, but we don't have to worry about that position from a defensive perspective. So maybe that's the rationale. But yeah, what do you do with Marte? Because he's I had the Reds game on and they're like, yeah, we don't, I'm trying to remember who was saying this. I can't remember if I had the Reds broadcast on or not, but they were like, what are they going to do with Marte? Because, they can't put him at short because of Ellie. I'm like, they can't put him at short because he can't play shortstop. Like, what are we talking about? Like, he's also defensively limited. Like, is he better at second than Matt McLean? I don't know, man. So yeah, they're in a weird kind of spot with some of their guys. And it's not like, Marte's under team control until 2030 or something. It's not like free agency is going to just thin the herd for them naturally. They're going to have to, but he's hitting well this year, Marte, so I don't know. I mean, you just DH him.
The Tigers did not attempt to repeat their plan from last year, which was get worse and profit. Instantly
got a lot
play better.
Though.
No, they didn't.
I don't know if they got a lot better, but they're a better team, so that's fine.
Yeah, right. They got Charlie Morton. They got Kyle Finnegan. They got Paul Sewald. They got Cody Hoyer.
Paul Sewald.
Yeah, they got Rafael Montero. They got Chris Paddock and Randy Dobnak. So they did a bunch of stuff. But
I like the Paddock move.
Yeah, I always like Morton. He's been pitching better of late. So, yeah, they need help less than they did last year when they decided that they were beyond help and then went on a run anyway. So, plus they have the power of Riley Green's mustache now. Have you read the quotes about Riley Green's mustache? He went from beard to mustache, and everyone's obsessed with the mustache now.
Who is everyone?
Everyone on the Tigers. Yeah. Okay. They all touch it now. They touch the stash. And
do they?
Green said, it's great. It gets the boys going.
Okay.
Whatever gets the boys going.
Okay.
And he said McKinstry may have gotten some power from touching the stash. He touched it. A lot of people touched it.
Okay. So
and AJ Hinch said, we've all touched it. I'm not sure how that's going to go over with quotes around it. And Green said it's getting kind of
AJ.
Weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So here's the thing. Again, I am a known advocate for the boys giving each other a little kiss if everyone wants to. And if Riley Green is fine with people touching his stash, that's between him and God. That's none of my business. Although it sounds like he's starting to register it as a bit odd.
Yes. He also said it's not a good look Just he doesn't like how the mustache
on
looks.
him?
But,
Okay.
yeah,
I was like,
not,
I don't
not
know.
the touching
like,
of it, but the
of all
just,
the I just
but he said, if it means winning, then I'll keep it. I don't know that it does, but
I guess you'll never convince baseball players of that. You've never met a more superstitious group of human beings in your life. Like there are Puritans who burned witches who are less superstitious than baseball players. I'm doing witches in air quotes. I just think that like it's on your face is the thing. Like of all the like things to touch in your workplace on another worker's face, it's just a lot. Like there's something very I mean, we're all thinking of so many jokes right now, and they all involve nastiness, right? Our grandmothers are embarrassed. They're blushing. They don't know why, but they're like, I feel like somebody's thinking a bad thing. But there's something so intimate about like you're in the dugout and all of a sudden like you're just Zach McKinstry's just like touching your face. He's just like, and it's like you can't. It's hard to touch your mustache without like obscuring part of your mouth. So it's just like a very. I don't know about that. You know, I don't know about it. Again, like if you're gonna be in the lip area already, just give each other a little kiss, you know, like give each other a little good little kiss. Will Carlos Correa be able to give members of the Astros a little kiss on the head? He's a little kiss on the head guy, you know? Is he gonna? Is he maybe like I'm coming home Houston. And I'm bringing back the little kiss on the head, you know?
Yep.
Is he gonna be able to do that? I don't think sorry, can I just say this about Carlos Correa? Because I feel like I don't think I appreciated how dire Isaac Paredes' injury was until they traded.
Done for the year, it seems.
Yeah, I did not somehow in all the comings and goings, I didn't clock how bad his injury was. I don't know how much they talked about that, but I just missed it. I'll blame myself and not the Astros. But anyway.
Yeah. No, it is. Well, first of all, speaking of other news about touching, Brian Cashman was asked whether Spencer Jones was untouchable, and he said some guys are more touchable than others. Clearly, Riley Green is among them. But yeah, Carlos Correa, like he has not played well this year. He played well last year when he was healthy, but between being unavailable sometimes and just not playing well this year, and there's no apparent injury this year that you can exactly trace it to, but it's in some ways that's almost more concerning. So him going back to the Astros, I guess it's a feel good story for Astros fans, and for everyone else, it's also feel good because you get to feel angry, I guess, because it's like, oh, good, I can consolidate my booing now. One of the sign stealers is back on the sign stealing team, so that simplifies things maybe. But I could imagine that. Yes, as you said, like the Twins may be happy to get out of the back end of that contract. Yeah. On the other hand, I could also imagine him just like going back to Houston and just miraculously having a run and know, it clicking and they need help.
It will 100% happen, Ben. It will 100 because look, the universe is like you need a new way to feel bad about your baseball team, Meg, and so he will go home and Rick, he's gonna be riding high on how he gets to go literally home because like, you know, his wife's family is from there. I think his parents maybe live there now. It's gonna be
I'm
ready to crash out about it. I'm ready.
It'll be vintage Carlos Correa, most likely. Yeah. All right. And then the Brewers, we haven't really mentioned. They didn't do much either. And you know, they're locked in a tight race there. Maybe they figured, hey, we have Andrew Vaughn. What else do we need? He's the best hitter in baseball. But he moved back in the box, Meg. He moved back in the batter's box. I'm sure that was the only reason. But
I want to be clear. I was never giving you guff about your theory.
No.
I said that there were examples to the contrary, but I didn't.
Yes.
It definitely works for some guys. Like
yes. Oh, yeah. But no, the Brewers, they got Shelby Miller and Jordan Montgomery, which would have been a major move at one point several years ago.
Jordan Montgomery, slow quitting king. Like, and I feel bad saying that because he had Tommy John. He's injured. Yeah. But like, Jordan Montgomery got a trade bonus and will probably never. I wonder if he'll even go to Wisconsin. Like, is that guy? Because he's a free agent at the end of the season. He's never going to throw a pitch for the Brewers, at least not on this contract. But he got a $500,000 trade bonus. So I think that's great. You know what? It feels like a win for labor generally, you know? And like that deal was that ended up being a real disaster of a free agent signing for the Diamondbacks. But what are you going to do? You know, sometimes those don't work out. And sometimes you get $500,000 for being home. That sounds great. I would take $500,000 to be at home. I'm already home, Ben.
Too. That's where I want to be. That's my natural habitat. But,
I know.
Brewers also got Danny Jensen. Anyway, they didn't do that much, but they'll probably just figure it out and win anyway somehow.
Although, you know, they could have used a big bet. I'm just saying, I know that Andrew Vaughn may never strike out again. Maybe he'll never miss, but there's a lot of evidence to the contrary about that. And Andrew Vaughn. You know, I hadn't seen Andrew Vaughn without his hat on until he went to Milwaukee. He should wear a hat.
Okay.
It's my not very generous Andrew Vaughn take. It's just like, I think the problem is, I think it's hat hair. You're exactly. The problem is that like he wears the cap because I'm gesticulating because I'm imitating his hair with my hand. I'm like, oh, it's his hair, and it makes him look so much older than he is. He's 27. He is more than a decade younger than I am, and boy, would you have a hard time convincing me of that if I didn't know what his birthday was. You know, that's a funny thing about him. What other teams haven't we talked about that we should? The Pirates sold. That's not surprising.
Not that much. Yeah. We didn't talk about Ronald Acuna's Achilles injury, which was, if this had not been a deadline pod, we probably would have talked about that. That's a bummer, and extra bummer because like it was sore and hurting him, and he didn't want to miss any more time, and so he probably pushed it too hard, and now he ends up with an Achilles injury. Hopefully it's not a terrible one, but and Buxton back on the IL with ribs. At least it's not knee. But I think we covered almost all the major trade activity. I did, before we say farewell, I wanted to share with you Sir Anthony Dominguez's farewell to Orioles fans. He put a graphic up on Instagram, I guess, that is almost indecipherable because it's like orange text over a partly orange background. And it's a real graphic design is my passion sort of goodbye message. But kind of nice because you figure he probably did this himself. It's just like a superimposed text that says, I just want to say thank you, Orioles, my family, and I will always be grateful for having been given the opportunity to be one of you. But I could barely read the words because it's against white and orange background. So always enjoy that. Let's see. You also... Yeah.
Sorry, I just opened the link. Orange is that's a hard color, you know? That's a tricky color. It's a tricky color to wear. And I'm learning a tricky color to read. Yeah.
And also, I believe you had an unhinged joke that you wanted to make that you didn't want me to forget because you posted that you had this.
I don't know if this is good. Okay. I don't know. Okay. I don't know. Right. I was riding the high of Eugenio Suarez being back in Seattle, and although the Mariners beat the Rangers, and you know they'd been tied for that third wild card, and like Eugenio doubled, and Cole Young hit this like freaking tank.
Yeah. This was all before Luis Corvello came down and shut him down for 2 innings.
Right. Yeah, it was before that. But, you know, it ended on kind of a down note because I think, speaking of Achilles injuries, I think that Trent Thornton blew out his, but they haven't gotten the MRI back on that. But needed a cart to get off the field. Never a good sign. Good. So, you know, that kind of soured the previously immaculate vibes. But before that happened, you know, Dominic Canzone. We got to talk about Dominic Canzone for a second. I mean, only for a second to set up this joke. So he's been, you know, speaking of Mariners guys who are the byproduct of a trade with the Diamondbacks, like Dominic Canzone has been really good for Seattle in limited action this year. And like he's definitely over his skis. Although, like, you know, he's running a super high BABIP, but, like, you know, from a WOBA perspective, it's not all that bad. So it's like, okay, Dominic Canzone. So Dominic Canzone's in the box, and he's, you know, they're showing Dominic Canzone from various angles. And here's what I'll say. A big dumper gets all the attention, right? I think that we need to spend a little time in a different Canzone because you're working with quite a...
Yeah.
It's not the big dumper, but there's a little bit of a dumper back there. And I'm just trying to work up like Canzone. You know, I feel like there's something there. I'm not saying it's a fully formed joke.
Right. It sounds like it would be the rooting section of fans out in the outfield or wherever would be in the Canzone, and they might have like they'd hold up some butts or something.
Yeah.
Maybe they'd moon people.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, I think that it's there's a tension, right? Because like sometimes a woman will be told that she's cans and it's her, you know.
Yes, right.
And it's not the hinder, and so there might be some slang confusion there, right? And so maybe that's why it doesn't work. But I was like, it's not even a joke so much as an observation that has been delivered sort of humorously. And I want it to work. And I wonder, like, does Dominic Canzone, I don't want to know the answer to this, actually. Okay? No one ask him. I would be mortified. But I do wonder, like, does Dominic Canzone feel like Cal's keister is obscuring his, concealing his hinder, or is he relieved? Is he like, I've been hearing about my great ass my whole life. You were worried I was going to be like all down the middle, and then I made a stimulants joke, and you were like, where's this going to go? And the place it's going to go is to me talking about Dominic Canzone's ass.
Yep.
Canzone. The cans part of it makes it tricky, you know, like that part, it's like, that doesn't maybe work, but I just think that it could, you know, and slang evolves over time, and maybe it can mean one thing broadly, but a different thing specifically, and the specific thing could be about Dominic Canzone's butt. Yeah.
Well, you can think about that, and you can think about Brock. All right. You know, I meant to say, I don't know where the A's will be playing in 2028, but I'm pretty bullish on the bats. Kurtz, Wilson, Butler, Rooker, Soderstrom, Clark, now DeVries. I think they got a stew going. Not Dave Stewart. He was a pitcher. Also, his nickname was Smoke. A few final follow-ups here. Listener Zach, Patreon supporter, wrote in to remind us of a precedent for cows in the clubhouse. Meg was talking about this, what with the raw milk and the Phillies. And of course, there was a situation with Meg's Mariners involving a cow in the clubhouse back in 1995. Ken Griffey Jr. lost a bet to Mariners manager Lou Piniella. It was about Griffey hitting homers in batting practice. Jr. lost the bet, and the stakes were a steak. And so instead of paying up with an actual steak dinner, Griffey delivered a cow to Lou Piniella's office after finding some pretense to remove the manager. So yes, everything in baseball has happened before and may happen again. Listener Rick, Patreon supporter, also wrote in about an email that we answered in our previous episode about whether some rich person or rich persons could frame a pitcher by betting on some pitch prop and making it look like that pitcher was doing something illegal, put a bunch of money on someone throwing a ball. Rick writes, the reason the betting scheme likely wouldn't work is the bets would need to be correct to implicate the pitcher. If a bunch of bets were placed on a first pitch ball, but the first pitch was a strike, it might raise some alarms, but it would be clear the pitcher wasn't involved in any wrongdoing. That's true. That is a complication. There might still be some suspicion. Maybe it would look like you agreed to throw a ball and then thought better of it at the last second or something. Also, as I said to Rick, there's a pretty decent chance that you would just get that correct by chance. First pitches this season have been balls almost 40% of the time league-wide, and with the right combination of batter and pitcher, you could probably probably get your odds even higher. Maybe you could get it to the point where it's close to a coin flip. And then if you did it a few times, then you'd be right eventually. It's probably an overly elaborate scheme anyway. Also, Raymond Chen, Effectively Wild Wikikeeper, Patreon supporter, wrote in about other precedents for mid-doubleheader trades because Sir Anthony Dominguez was traded between two teams that were playing each other in the middle of a doubleheader. He pitched in the second game, not in the first game, of course, but I mentioned that there was some precedent. Cliff Heathcote and Max Flack, outfielders who switched teams and jerseys, I believe, the Cardinals and Cubs back in 1922. Raymond's research paid dividends, he said. On mid-doubleheader trades, I found this. On Monday, June 8th, 1952, Cal Abrams, a spare outfielder for the Brooklyn Dodgers, was traded to the Cincinnati Reds between games of a doubleheader. The funny part is that before the first game started, the Dodgers manager, Charlie Dressen, told Abrams that if he wanted to stay with the team, he had to heckle the opposing team and their manager from the dugout for the entirety of the doubleheader. After doing this for the entirety of the first game, Abrams was told between games that he had been traded to the Reds and had to immediately report to the manager, Rogers Hornsby. He had been heckling throughout the first game. Hornsby, not the greatest guy to begin with. Also, Raymond says Jose Cardinal went from the Phillies to the Mets in the middle of the July 2nd, 1979 doubleheader, but spent the second game on the bench, so he missed out on being a trivia question answer. Until now, at least. You don't have to miss out on being a Patreon supporter of this podcast. If you go to patreon.com/effectivelywild, you can be one too. You can sign up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Cody B., Trevin, Tom Myers, David Vero Gorbitz, and MZ. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, prioritized email answers, discounts on merch, and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, YouTube Music, etc. Your positive reviews and ratings do help us. You can also find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. And you can check the show notes at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. That'll do it for today and for this week. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back to talk to you next week.
It's effective.